Welcome everybody. We are so lucky today to have two very, very distinguished early years experts, Louise, Mercieca and Connelly, and they're going to take us on a journey towards nutritional triumph. Louise is a health and nutrition writer, and she also has a radio show called Food for Thought on Teach Ag Radio. She has launched a series of CPD accredited courses called How Food Shapes Your Child, and those are aimed at all of those working in education of all ages. She's co-launched a community interest company called the Good Food Academy, whose mission is to reverse the alarming prediction of life expectancy for this generation of children. So she has a lot of experience and knowledge to share with us today. Connelly, he's known as the Skinny Jean Gardener. He's a prominent figure in the world of gardening and education. He's one of the UK's top 50 gardening presenters. He's appeared on Blue Peter, BBC Teach, BBC Radio 1 and Extreme Gardening. He's an accomplished children's author. He's written How to Get Kids Gardening, and his influence extends to the airwaves as the host of the Sunday Times Best Gardening podcast and the Skinny Jean Gardener podcast. And just this year, he's been honoured as the UK's #1 children's garden educator. So we are really, really honoured to have two amazing experts with us today. Louise will start this morning, but together they'll be discussing definition of nutrition, rapid growth and development, a foundation for lifelong health, emotional behavioural aspects of nutrition, how outdoor experiences are vital for holistic development in early childhood education, and physical fitness, cognitive development, critical thinking and creativity. So that's a lot to get through this morning. I'm going to be doing Louise's slides for her. So without further ado, Louise, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Louise Mercieca. I spend all of my time talking about the importance of formative nutrition for childhood development. So, where's my slides gone? So my talks have been getting slightly more depressing over the years that I've been working in this, as the external situation around us has changed. We've obviously now we've got cost of living crisis, the aftermath of COVID, but even prior to those things, there's a lot of change in the health landscape and the future outcomes for children. So there's never been a more important time to look at the real role of nutrition. I'm going to do a Chris Whittier thing. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the Oxford English dictionary definition of nutrition is the process of providing or obtaining the food necessary for health and growth. So it's a fairly standard catch-all definition of nutrition there, but I think we've kind of lost our way with nutrition quite a lot. And I think that's an intergenerational thing. I don't think it's a new thing. I think it's been going on for at least 40 years, where we've kind of lost that connection with food. And when Lee comes and does his talk, Lee is much more organised, and he's been sitting ready waiting for a long time. He's much more organised. But when he does his talk, he will talk about this food connection and the importance of how we know where food comes from, how children know where food comes from, that it doesn't come from packers, that it comes from the ground, etc., etc. It's really important, because when we're connected, and this applies to all elements of nature, when we're connected more with nature, we're more in tune with ourselves. But I think with food, with nutrition, with the food landscape, we've kind of lost our way a bit with that. So whilst that is the definition, I think it's a much deeper role that food has. Next, I'll just do that when I'm in the next slide. I'll just wave it along and Gail will do the magic. Okay, so early childhood it's a really important time when it comes to nutrition. And what I think we've thought in the past is that childhood is in the here and now. So when it comes to food, if we have something in childhood, it's momentary. It's not. Everything that happens in childhood makes an impact. Everything that happens in childhood lasts a lifetime, and food is no different to that. So when I talk about early childhood and nutrition, talking about the biological growth and development of a child, because there's an awful lot of fast growth and development that goes on in childhood. We are, particularly, I'll come on to this, but our brain is growing faster than at any other point in our life. And all of that takes a lot of energy, but we're not just shaping the biological growth and development, we're shaping a food relationship. And that's really important in childhood. All the neural connections are starting to take place that start to shape food habits and food behaviours. And that's where we can really make an impact with children, because they're growing up in an environment, a food landscape that's designed for convenience. And so they are bombarded with, I do lots of campaigning on food, and there's lots of statistics about how many adverts for junk food a child will see in a day. They are bombarded with images, with food advertising, that they shouldn't be, but they are. And so if they have this emotional and habitual food relationship that's driven to the type of food landscape that we now have, they're going to struggle with their food relationship. And I see this with adults. These adverts around food advertising, etc., they have an impact because they make you want the food, and that's obviously the idea of the advertising, but you're not hungry. And so we get into a cycle of eating when we're not hungry, etc., etc. There's all sorts of metabolic cycles that come with that, which lead to unhealth. But childhood is really a time for the biological growth and development. That's really important, right? But also we're shaping a child's relationship with food. So the two areas that grow the fastest and we have the most impact on in childhood is the brain development, particularly between 0 and 5. And the 0 to 3 window is where most of the neural connections start to take place, and food has a role to play with that, most definitely. But the 0 to 5 window is really when those food habits and behaviours start to take place. So if we haven't given a 5-year-old a pudding every time they finish their meal, they won't expect it at 6, 7, 8, 9, etc. If the 5-year-old has always had something sweet after their main meal, they will expect it then forevermore, because the taste expectation has been set, the neural pathways and connections have been set. We have something savoury, we finish with something sweet, and that is a deep-rooted neural connection that's then become a habit and a behaviour, and we could almost say an addiction. And I've been posting this week about, there's some news out about ultra-processed foods, and they should be called addictive. It won't make a blind bit of difference if they have a label on them as addictive, but the neural connection of those foods is shaping habits and behaviours of food. Bones and skeletal growth, this is really important, because childhood, I like to refer it as a window of opportunity. So we have this period of childhood where we have a blank canvas of a child, and we can really shape and develop them to be the best version of themselves. And the biological best version of themselves when it comes to their skeleton is their peak bone mass. And their peak bone mass is laid down in childhood. Once we get beyond peak bone mass, we can only maintain what we've got. So we can, as we're older, we can exercise, we can eat well, we can not be too sedentary, because all those things are detrimental to our bone mass. But in childhood, we can actually get it to a stronger skeleton frame than we can if we do the right things in childhood. So childhood is a window of opportunity for building the neural connections and the biological growth of the brain, and laying down the foundations for a strong skeleton, a skeleton which has to last them a lifetime. And if we don't lay down the foundations for a strong skeleton in childhood, they'll be more prone to fractures, more prone to things like osteoporosis, joint problems, all sorts of issues that you think a grown-up will only get, children can get them too. So next slide, please. Past the dancing skeleton. Thank you. So food foundations, nutrition is not just feeding a child. Nutrition is filling a child, yes, so that they're not hungry, but shaping them. It's very much about shaping them for future health, because there are lots of health outcomes that we're now seeing as a result of changes to our food landscape over the last 20 years. This generation of children are the most exposed to the food landscape that we now have from an early age. Other generations have kind of come into the food landscape. This generation's exposed to it prior to conception. And I won't go into it because I don't have time, but there is an epigenetic link with what both parents eat before they even conceive the child, and the child that they do go on to have, and their food habits and behaviours. So there's a really deep link, and that link is where we as grown-ups have to be mindful of our food relationship as well, and how we can help to, if we're planning on having more children, how that links with generations to come. But I don't have time to go into epigenetics. But when we look at nutrition and health outcomes, nutrition is a key driver for most health outcomes. In fact, the World Health Organization, and every future statistic you see of by 2030 the UK will have this, by 2030 so many people will have this, we see this rise in this condition. Nutrition is one of the key drivers for all of those health outcomes. So it's definitely in the mix of things that are driving health outcomes. And childhood is the time where we can really influence the embedding of healthier habits. And that's really important, because the food landscape isn't going to change. We need to ensure that children understand the food landscape, and the impact it has on them, not just blindly trust food and blindly trust advertising, because it's not for their health, it's not for their benefit. These manufacturers know all the things we know about food science and palate development and emotional connections with food and hyperpalatability and the fact you can overeat, etc. They know all of that, and they still advertise towards younger generations, knowing full well that it's not in the benefit of their health. So children have to be empowered to understand that. So let's move on. Let's see what's next. So yes, our food landscape has very much changed over the last 20 years. Has had the biggest difference, I think, but it's been changing for 40 years, and it started to change when we started to get more advanced with how we could store food. So when people got excited about microwave meals back in the 70s, and you could get something from a freezer to a microwave, and it was revolutionary and it was amazing. And there's lots of very sort of sexist advertising, if you look back into the 70s, of how a woman can now have it all because she can go out to work and she can come home and feed her family with a microwave meal. No mention of anybody else doing anything in the household. But it was very much like, well, you can now do everything because we have this wonderful way of food being able to be created from, the freezer to a microwave. And that was in a way kind of helpful, but also really, really detrimental, because it paved the way for a complete change in our food landscape, a complete change in the way that we view food's availability, convenience, etc., etc. So let's move on. The impact of those changes is now starting to be seen. So as I say, the last 20 years has really seen the biggest change in food advertising, food availability, things like Just Eat and Deliveroo, and you're watching something and an advert will come up and say, you can have this by the next, by the next half hour, if you're watching a football game, you can have this food with you for the next half, etc., etc. Those sorts of things have really come about in the last 10 years, that food availability, the instant gratification that we can get from our food landscape has really changed in the last 10 years. The bombardment of advertising has increased massively. So the UK now has the second highest intake of UPFs. UPFs are ultra processed food. Haven't got time to go into them properly, otherwise I'll still be here at 6 o'clock tonight. Ultra processed foods are considered a group 4 classification of foods. They are about as far removed from a natural food as you could possibly be. So it's kind of like, this is a banana on this spectrum. Over here, that's a group 1 food. Group 4 is a synthetically syrup banana liquid into a milkshake. That's classed as a banana milkshake. Never seen a banana in its life, but it's called a banana milkshake, and that is classed as a group 4 ultra processed food item. The banana has never actually met a banana to get the banana flavour. The UK, children now have a diet predominantly ultra processed. And that doesn't mean they live off junk food. That's a result of our landscape, our food landscape. You go into a supermarket, you don't even realise some of the things you're buying are ultra processed. It's not like you're living off burgers or pizzas, which are junk food. It's crept into so many aspects of our food landscape that we don't know how much we're eating of ultra processed food. It's just things have changed, formulations have changed, recipes have changed, and these ingredients are cost saving. So they've come into our food landscape in a way that we've never seen before. So children have 65% on average of their diet made up of ultra processed foods. Next slide, please. And the result of that, which we're now seeing, is children are not exempt and never have been exempt from adult diseases. They just didn't used to get them. So people would think, oh, it's childhood, it's puppy fat, they'll burn it off. Children have got fast metabolisms, etc., etc. None of that is true. So children are not exempt from adult diseases. Children will get every disease that we can get. They can get it in childhood. One example of that I always use, because it's shocking, is that in the year 2000, we still call type 2 diabetes adult onset. And we still refer to it as something that happens in middle age, and you got it when you were growing up. Year 2000, the UK had the first child diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. Fast forward to the year 2021, I have to look at my notes, and we had 3,432 children in the UK with type 2 diabetes, an exponential increase, but the trajectory is still going up. Obviously, we had COVID. Since those figures came out, COVID saw the biggest spike in childhood obesity. Sorry, girl, I'm waving my arms, and that's normally my cue for slides. So COVID had the biggest spike in childhood obesity that we had seen. It's not surprising. There's an emotional connection with food. There's boredom eating. There's a lack of PE. There's a lack of going out. Some children couldn't access getting outdoors at all. That's not surprising. The mental health impact for me is bigger than the obesity impact of COVID, but that's going to happen and ripple for years to come. But children are not exempt from adult diseases. They can get high blood pressure, they can get high cholesterol, they can get type 2 diabetes, they can get joint problems, they can get everything that we can get as a result of nutrition and lifestyle. They didn't used to, because the food landscape was different. Right, that is now a slide moving on. And rather depressing, and I'll try and not be too depressing, because I do, my talks have been getting very depressing lately, and I'm depressing myself. I'm part of a group in Parliament, and things that they do is look at lots of research papers and health trajectories and where we're going with children's health. They looked over the last 10 years of reports to see where things were going. And this quote, I think, just kind of sums up where we're going. For the first time in living memory, the coming generation, our children, are likely to find themselves physically, mentally, and economically worse off than their predecessors. Now, this quote is new. This quote has just come out, but for the last 5 years, I've been using a quote from The Lancet about children of this generation having a reduced life expectancy. So this isn't new, it's just still heading in the wrong direction, because that quote from The Lancet was predicting if things didn't change, children would have a reduced life expectancy. Well, 5 years on, we've had COVID, we've got the cost of living crisis, we've had the government U-turn on a number. And don't get me started about the government, else I'll still be here at 8 o'clock tonight. But they've U-turned on a number of proactive health initiatives that could have helped children. So these quotes are only going to continue to come to fruition, because nothing is changing for the better. So for the first time in living memory, the coming generation, physically, mentally, economically worse off. That is not acceptable. Next slide. But what can we do about it? Because, as I say, the government had U-turned on a number of things that could have been proactive. The junk food, there's the hashtag #AddEnough, and it's a campaign to stop this junk food advertising directed at children. Transport for London did it, but it wasn't universally rolled out nationwide like it was going to be. The bog-off deals, the cost of living crisis is obviously creating a huge health and wealth divide. The only available foods for many are ultra processed foods, because you might not have electricity, but you might have a shop on your road that will give you something warm for £1. You know, a takeaway that gives chicken and chips for £2 or something. You're going to go with that option. You know it's not the healthiest, but you haven't got electricity at home, so you're going to go with that option. People don't have choices. And then the government will come out and say, well, people need to make better choices. No, they're not choices, they're factors. And whilst these factors, not choices, are at play for people, they can't decide to eat better or healthier or shop better or cook better, because that is not a choice for them. So there are many things that we can't control and many things that we can't influence, and it will take a seismic change from somebody with a lot more power and authority than I will ever have to actually try to make a change in this health and wealth divide. But one thing that we can do is just, whenever I do talks on nutrition, it can feel like all doom and gloom, and everyone's all despondent when I finish talking, and everyone's all miserable, and it's we're all doomed. But we're not. There are things we can do, and I always talk about outside of our circle of influence, inside of our circle of influence. So we can't do anything about the strain on the NHS. We can't do anything about government policy. We can look to ourselves and think, well, what can we do one child at a time? What change can we make one child at a time? And for me, next slide, please, Gail. For me, I always think it's education. So what I do, I don't work with individual families and clients anymore. What I do now is try to kind of approach lots of people at the same time. With education on food, with education on these health issues, we can't be ostriches. I think we have been for a long time. We kind of, yeah, food's not that important, you know, we're okay. We are walking into a health disaster for a generation of children. And we can do something to help them. We can't wait for a change. There won't be one. We've seen the government U-turn on initiative after initiative after initiative. There won't be a change coming. The food landscape won't change. Processed foods there's far too much money in food manufacturing to change for healthier food. Healthier food is 3 times more expensive than processed food. That's not going to change. The reason why the government didn't implement they were going to ban the buy one, get one free on junk food. And they said, oh, we can't possibly do that because we're in a cost of living crisis. People can't afford, if we take the bog off deals away, people can't afford to shop. No, what you're doing is making it only possible for people to only buy the junk food because that's the only food with the offers on. What they should have done, obviously, was make the bog off deals on healthier foods, but that was never an option. That was never going to come into play. So there's not going to be a big change. So what can we do? What can we influence? So I spend my time trying to educate with my book, How Food Shapes Your Child, and with my CPD courses. Next slide, please. So I do have an offer for today. It's not a huge sales pitch. It's just I've got so much to say and I don't have time to say it all. So if you want to hear more of what I've been saying and learn more about the impact of formative nutrition on childhood development and health outcomes, then I do have a range of courses. And I do have a free course. So if there is no financial barrier as well, if you don't want to do these, I do have a free course, which I'll make sure everyone, because it's new. But this is the offer for today. So my courses are all online, all access online, build a brain, build a skeleton, shape food relationship. They're normally £22. My book's normally 16. Shove it all together into an offer for today. £25 for the book and the course. So obviously that's then yours for life. The course is yours access for life, even when you've completed it. You can go back to it for the videos, the downloads, etc., etc. So I think there's one more slide. Is there another slide? Yes, that's my contact details. So if you did want to find out more, learn a bit more, get information on the free course, because the free course is all about the food landscape. So I made it free because there's no point saying, oh, these are the issues with food and price, if then you have to pay for the course. So that course is free, optimizing nutrition on a budget and navigating the food landscape. Anyone can have that for free. That's absolutely fine. But if you wanted to know more about the biology of formative nutrition, the brain, the bones, the shaping food relationship, those courses and the book are combined as an offer. So yeah, just get in touch, find out more. I could talk for literally for hours, but I think it's my turn to shut up now. So that's me.
Thank you so much, Louise.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm not as organised as Louise. I've got one slide, which means that Gail doesn't have to do as much work today. But I'll be speaking for about 20 minutes. I really would love everyone to make use of the chat. I know we've got a few questions, but if you've got any more questions throughout this, I love doing Q&A at the end. So please do drop some questions in the chat bit as well. But yeah, I appreciate everyone. 61 people here today, so it's good. It's great to see you all on a Wednesday morning. Right, today I am going to talk a lot about gardening and children gardening as well. Just a little bit about myself is that I am Lee Connelly, the Skinny Jean gardener, and I've been gardening for 10 years now. So everything I talk about now has been learnt when I was about 25, 26 years old. I totally missed out on the whole experience of gardening and growing my own when I was younger. And very slowly over the last 10 years, I've been teaching myself and growing my own food and learning how to grow it. I actually started when I was 25, 26, honestly thinking that potatoes grew on some sort of little tree at the end of an allotment, and you had to go and pick them. I had no idea how to grow potatoes. So over the last 10 years, I've been teaching myself how to do that, along with my daughter as well, which got me into the whole children's gardening thing. And I've also been on Blue Peter. I had a stint on Blue Peter as the Blue Peter gardener for a while, teaching children how to grow their own. More recently, I've been getting into schools with something called School Garden Success, which I'll be talking about a bit later on. And this year also, I was in the House of Lords talking about the importance of children learning to grow their own and care for plants, which is so important. So parts of today, I'll be talking about little points that I've learned over the last 10 years. But the biggest thing for me, the reason I got into like children's gardening was because my daughter, she's 8 years old now, and she literally from the age of 2 months old, it was obviously like a daddy daycare day when this happened, to grow her own wildflower seeds. Obviously, she doesn't remember that now, but that is exactly where her whole grow your own and gardening journey started, from such a young age. Over the years, it's been incredible to be able to see her grow her own vegetables and learn and care about what she's eaten as well, which is so important and goes back to what Louise was talking about. And also that connection between just father and daughter as well, and having that tiny little seed that turns into a plant you can actually eat is absolutely magic. And so we grew all of our own vegetables over the years. We grew our strawberries. When I first started growing my own, we grew loads and loads of strawberries, and then Olive came along, and when she was about 2 years old, for whatever reason, that year I grew no strawberries at all, and it turns out that Olive was walking down the end of the garden and just picking all the strawberries. We saw just like red all round her mouth where she'd been eating loads of strawberries, and we dealt with that really easy. We just put barbed wire around that area, and she never came anywhere closer to it. That was a joke, by the way, just to let you know. All right. I see some faces thinking, really? Yeah, and then we got into caring for wildlife as well. And just over the years, it's been a really incredible experience of seeing that, and obviously working in education at the same time, and seeing how that affects children and the way they relate to adults and just to food as well is really important. So over the last 10 years, there's been a few different findings that we've found as a team. So now we've got a bit of a team together that work with children, and the biggest thing is that growing your own food and seeing how food grows for children, we're getting healthier children, right? And they're eating healthier because they get to see actually what that plant is, where your food comes from. It's really interesting. When I first started going into schools or meeting children at shows, I used to ask this question, and it's always a question that people use as an example, and I thought it was just, oh no, surely that's not right. But asking children where their food comes from, and the answer being Tesco's or Lidl, was something that kept cropping up, and just to see their amazement. I think as adults sometimes we forget that that children, I know as a parent anyway, but as children don't know where food comes from. It doesn't just come from a shop wrapped in cellophane, ready to go. So when we've got children outside growing, it means that they're seeing that whole journey towards that plant that they can actually eat from, which means that they're going to put it on their plate and eat it. I don't know if anyone's tried to get children to eat sprouts, but it can be very difficult. But actually, once children have grown up, once they've put the care and love into that plant, they're more likely to eat it. Maybe not sprouts. I mean, I'm still not a massive fan of sprouts, but but loads of different vegetables that usually children would never eat. So we are, by getting children to grow their own, we've got healthier children. Also, we've got stronger and more coordinated children as well. So when children are outside, they're not realizing they're exercising. This is the best thing. Being outside, you're exercising. You're actually digging the soil. You're outside rather than sitting down. I've got an 8-year-old now, and YouTube seems to be the biggest thing for them, right? When they're outside, they're not thinking about that. They're getting exercise. They're outside. They're getting some air inside them, some fresh air, which is absolutely incredible. And so what we found was that actually 32% of children that either play or grow outside are less likely to be overweight because they're outside, they're growing their own food, they're eating healthier, and they're getting that exercise. So that's an amazing part of getting children outside. We're also getting smarter and more creative children. Again, it's very easy to sit a child in front of an iPad and then get on about your day. But actually getting outside and growing your own food, or just gardening or being outside in nature, that whole thing improves their concentration levels, which is very important, their behavior as well. But also what we found was children who gardened showed a 46% increase in creative problems and solving skills outside. And that's just that creativity of children being out there, thinking about what they're growing, thinking about how they're going to design a garden. Most recently, we have been doing in the summer a festival. I run a festival as well, a children's and family festival. And we have 15 incredible schools that have been designing show gardens. And they're not big gardens, they're small space gardens. But just seeing how the children react to having that responsibility of designing and caring for a garden is incredible, right? So we're getting more creative children by being outside. And this one's big for me is working as a team. So 80% of children who learn outdoors, they build empathy and understanding for others. So working together, that's communication between children is super, super important with what we're doing outside. So for me, grow your own has to be, there's 3 different parts of gardening that is great for children. Is grow your own first. There's great education within that getting children healthier and more creative outside, as I just mentioned. But growing your own plant is very, very important. Wildlife, again, in fact, I've noticed a lot more over the last 10 years, children being more involved in caring for wildlife, caring about their gardens, caring about their space that they have. Because at the end of the day, before we built these houses on top of basically wildlife's homes, right? And children are very, very good at nowadays of thinking about that and learning around caring for hedgehogs, bees, especially bees. 1 in 3 of everything we eat has been pollinated by a bee. So bees are super, super important. Bug hotels, all different things that like grow your own and wild. It's very educational, but we must make sure there's that fun aspect. That's number 3 for me out of the 3 things that you must concentrate on with children. If you've got those fun aspects outside, then they're more likely to get out there and enjoy that space. You can add those educational parts to the garden, but if you don't have them fun aspects, it's very difficult to make sure that they still get out there. So over the years, one of the things that I found with children and gardens and education is that there's no direction for this sort of thing. There's no it's very difficult to find information to know exactly what to do and when. And one of the reasons that I found this was I actually went on tour. It was actually in 2020, and we did 15 schools, it was primary schools at the time, around the UK within 1 week, and we got 10,000 children gardening. And we went to these schools and we threw loads of seeds at children. I honestly felt like I was like Jesus on the back of a pickup truck throwing seeds out at kids, and they were excited and loving it. And then I disappeared and went to another school. I left them loads of products that they could use. And what we found was, because there was actually no direction within the education system, that nothing happened with all that equipment. Nothing happened with those seeds. I mean, during that year, we did have COVID. Some schools did say that those seeds were really good for children at home, and kept that communication going. Again, bringing that communication within children and adults. But because there was no direction about what to do with the equipment, a lot of it was just left in a cupboard somewhere. And even in my own daughter's school, although they have just got it out 3 years later, that a lot of it was just left in a cupboard, right? And so that's one reason we made School Garden Success, which basically gave the right equipment, the right lessons, and the right direction. Because if you haven't got a guide, a direction towards the final goal, then that's where it fails mostly. So we made sure that we offered support, we offered that direction and that guidance as well. And the best thing that we've found from it over the last 3 years since we've launched it is that it's not just primary schools that use it. We've had secondary schools. We've just had scouts and cubs and beavers start to use it, which is absolutely incredible. We've had homeschoolers. We've had nurseries use it as well, which means that there's a real need for that sort of thing out there to actually get children growing. And it's when I visit those different areas, those different places that are using that piece of equipment, it is amazing to see how the children are so involved in it, because the teachers, the parents, all are part of that story, and that's what it's really about. Whenever I first started my growing experience, all the way back with Olive, my daughter, when she was 2 months old, it was about having that experience and creating memories. And if it's very easy to say, right, here you go, away you go, and maybe get someone to come in and do it, but you need to be part of that whole story for it to really succeed, with children. Most recently, I went to it was a nursery actually, and part of the plan we do a pizza, right? And I love pizza. I know that might not go with what Louise is saying healthy pizza. Louise, it's healthy pizza, a vegetable pizza, and we get all of the children to grow towards this pizza. And it was their first year. They've just started the plan, so we visited their little nursery, and we're talking to all the educators there and to the children as well. And when they know that end goal is going to be something they can actually eat, their eyes light up. And I think that is probably the biggest thing. When they know what the end goal is, it excites them and gets them more involved in it. So that is something that we've been using now for 3 years. More recently, like I said, I've been in the House of Lords trying to get it into the curriculum. But I think early years, this very early time in children's life, is very, very important for children to start that learning journey. As they go into secondary school, they sort of lose that part of it. There's a lot more distractions, and so when we're in those early years settings, those primary school settings, that is the time to really make a healthier generation. Is exactly what we're creating here, a healthier generation to go forwards. In secondary school, they'll forget about it, but that will come back in the future, and we'll have parents that are going out there and educating their children. So our children, their children. So that is a really big push for what we are doing. Even I now, like, my daughter's 8 years old, and this week I don't quite know how this is going to work with my brand of getting children educated, but even I'm struggling to get my daughter at 8 years old gardening. So these early years are very, very important, because those is where the education starts. Exactly using my daughter as an example, when we started, when she was very, very young, she's getting that grow your own knowledge in. Now she's 8 years old. She thinks she's far too cool to garden with her dad. So we need to get that education in early before we lose them to the distractions that children do get. So the earlier we get children growing, the better. Most recently, as I said, we've been campaigning to try and get that into the curriculum in primary schools. But if you want to find out more, then I do say go to the School Garden Success website. There's actually a free lesson on there, which you can check out. And it's very, very simple one that is just making a little mini allotment. I think that if I want to give you some tips to start off with this whole journey, has to be start small, because unlike me, I started a massive allotment when I first started, and I can only tell you that about 98% of it died before the summer, because I just started too big. I mean, I did also rotivate a load of couch grass, and if anyone knows anything about couch grass, you definitely don't rotivate it into your allotment, because you'll be seeing it for the rest of your life. But yes, starting small is very, very important around because children then become uninterested. Same with like growing your seeds. I love growing from seed. It can be very difficult. Start with just 3 seeds. Very easy. Ask the children as well. This is something we do forget, is asking children what they want to grow, what they want to eat. If they're growing onions and they don't like onions, they're never going to care about them. I'm also asked quite a lot is what is the top 3 things for children to go, and I can never answer that because every child's different. Sometimes I see a lot radishes. Oh, radishes are so fast to grow, they're quick, and children love quick stuff to grow. The only thing is, I don't know a child yet that likes radishes. If you do, put it in the chat. So yes, 3 things to start with. Also, don't worry about growing from seeds. This is the thing that people think, got to grow from seed. We've got to have all these pots everywhere. Go to the garden centre, especially in the summer, or from around April all the way through to July. Really, you can still get plants that will be able to keep fruiting. We've got tomatoes still going at the moment. Our seasons are changing a lot. I was in t-shirt and shorts in October at the weekend, which is unheard of, right? So we are getting longer seasons to be able to grow in as well. So go with the children, buy the plants, care for the plants, look after them, start that journey in that way. So yeah, I do say please go check out the School Garden Success website. There's a free lesson on there, video lesson that you can use, and it's really easy to be able to start that whole gardening journey. I think the biggest thing, I think my final thing that I want to say is that yes, we're going to get a healthier generation from like growing our own with these children. They're going to learn about our environment and really care about it. But the biggest thing that is all the way through this is memories and children coming away with a positive impact from just being outside and the mental well-being bonuses of just being out there and gardening together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lee. That's been great. And thank you to the comments we've had in the chat and in the inundation of the questions. I can just say just a couple of observations I've made when you guys were talking, and thanks so much to Louise as well for your side. It's so sad, isn't it? You go to the park nowadays and you see more children on tablets and on mobile devices than you see them running around and playing, and how society has changed. And I suppose us as educators, you know, it's our responsibility to do that, to start that process and break that really bad habit that's kind of creeping into society. Because it's easy, isn't it? If your child's not screaming, you can just plonk them in front of the TV or something, and that's bad behavior. We do speak to obviously a lot of settings, working with them through training and everything else we do at Prevent to support the earlier sector. And one of the biggest things settings are saying is that home observation and communication, getting parents involved in the children's learning. So, you know, growing something at the setting at home that the parents can try and keep alive, and getting those children, you know, kind of mirroring what you're doing in the setting at home. That's a really good way of trying to promote that and getting the parents involved in, you know, good behavior, good judgment of what to eat and that kind of thing. So yeah, I love that. Sorry, I digress. I've got so many questions and I get so excited when we have this webinar. So I'll try and get to the point. Louise, this one is for you. Someone's asked me, what was the hashtag of the campaign you mentioned when regarding making better choices?
Oh, there's the advertising one was hashtag add enough, as the AD enough. So had enough. That was that one. It is still in use, but it was really prevalent last May. So it was kind of trending at that point. It's not as big now, but it's still being used. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Lee, this one's for you. What success did you have at lobbying with House of Lords, and what was the outcome?
Oh, I don't know if anyone's ever tried to speak to government before, but by gosh, it's hard. It's something that I've recently just got into, right? So this is the first year I've really started to go to the House of Lords, and I want to say hang around, but I suppose it is hanging around with them. I think it's a long journey. I've spent 10 years getting to this point in my career. My wife did ask me how long I'll be pushing this within Parliament for. I said, oh, maybe another 10 years we'll keep trying. I think it's a long journey. I don't think my daughter will ever get to see the benefits of it, but I'm really pushing it over the next 10 years. I think everything takes time. It's like a plant, right? It doesn't happen overnight. We'll very slowly grow into that. So yeah, I hope that answers it. I don't want to slag the government too much.
No. I just thought if there was an outcome that would, that you wanted to share, but it's a journey.
I think the biggest thing is this year we've been speaking to the horticultural committee, who are bringing in new laws around the horticulture and gardening, and they've been bringing up evidence, and so that was back in May. Now it's all going through different parts on red tape, where they're coming up with the different laws around it. That will come into November. Anything that comes from that will be February, and then we'll just see what goes on from there.
Brilliant. Just on that, I don't know if anybody can hear my dog barking. Just that's just precise moment in time. So we have some questions. If I start with, what would you say? I think this one is for Louise. What would you say is the common misconceptions or challenges when it comes to early years nutrition, and how can we address them? So maybe a bit more of a practical example within settings.
I think a common one is kind of that. I think what's not often kind of really understood is our role in shaping a child's relationship with food. So often in early years, because I go in as an early years consultant on nutrition, and I'll still go in and I'll still hear the child is upset or something, and there'll still be, let's have a cuddle, let's have a biscuit. I'll still hear that kind of scenario playing out, or let's all eat this and we can have pudding. You know, let's all do this and we can have some cake, a lovely treat of cake. I still hear that kind of food language. And I think for me, that's a really big misconception, that we're rewarding, bribing, comforting with food. It's one of my big sort of bugbears with food, because that's not, as I said earlier, nothing with a child is in the here and now. So there's not just a momentary comfort with a biscuit. That is creating a pathway that's linking food to comfort. That's creating a future emotional eater. If we're saying we always eat this and you can get to your pudding, the food is a barrier to get to the good thing of the pudding. The pudding has become this sort of on a pedestal, doesn't deserve to be on a pedestal. And it's also creating a neural pathway that we finish on something sweet. If we think we're getting to a goal of cake by achieving something, then as adults, because my role as a nutritional therapist is to work with the behaviours of food in adults as well. If we say we're going to get to a reward of something, a food reward, as a grown-up, we can reward ourselves. We can also sort of deny ourselves, and that all leads to all manner of different spectrum of eating behaviours and eating disorders. So when food is a reward, a comfort, or a bribe, it's not just in the here and now. And that's probably the biggest thing that I still see, and it's a battle I'm battling.
Do you have an example that you can potentially give the audience today, an example of how to combat that, or maybe a different, if that comes across, if it's a barrier to eating the vegetables, for example, anything that you potentially could give them advice on how they could approach that, opposed to offering a dessert as a reward?
Mm-hmm. When I work in early years with individual settings, I always try and get the children involved. The key is get the children as involved in their own biology as possible. So we're not imposing things on them, we're involving them in the journey. Children can understand their own biology. Lee's been using his daughter as an example. I'll use my son. For mental health day yesterday at breakfast, I said to him, he's 10. I said to him, what would you do? What should we do for our mental health? And he said, eat omega-3s and play football. So he has been trained through his short life to understand that the food he eats impacts on his physical, biological, and emotional self. He understands that. Children can, and this is from the age of 3. He'd be talking about his prebiotic gut army from the age of 3. If we involve children and tell them what's in the food, why we're eating it, what it does for their body, they'll be more engaged. As Lee said, they'll be more likely to eat something the more ownership they've had in that journey. If we just say, eat your vegetables, are good for you, they're not going to understand, why is it good for you? Why? The question why, children ask a lot, and grown-ups kind of get a bit annoyed by the why, but actually it's very pertinent that a child says why, because they should say why, and we should engage them in the why as much as possible.
I love that. Thank you so much. Lee, we've got one for you. How can outdoor experiences be integrated within the early childhood education settings, especially when there's like a lot of people, not a lot of settings in urban areas have outdoor spaces? What would you suggest, they could do as potential alternative to still create that outdoor area, but with a limited space?
I just said he looks like he's fallen asleep, but I think he's probably frozen.
He is frozen. Louise, do you have a answer on that one? Well, Lee's hopefully joining us again shortly.
I can't answer it. Am I mute? No, I can't answer it as well as Lee could, but I know that he has said when I've spoken with him, as I work with him on projects, that you can grow anything anywhere, a windowsill, a balcony. You start really small. You can. My son's got a tiny pot of, I don't even know what's in it, something that he's growing, and it's just like the size of a disposable coffee cup. Actually, Lee gave it to him, so he'll know if he ever comes back what's in it, but it's like a disposable coffee cup, an ecological friendly one. He's growing something in that, so it doesn't need to be, children just need to see something popping up through the soil to be excited, and that can be in a tiny space. And so in an urban setting, little pots on a windowsill, they'll get the light, they'll get the, the you can water them, etc. Don't need to have a big outdoor garden, or create a relationship with somewhere like a local allotment and take them, with all the usual permissions, etc., take them to somewhere to see a bigger space so that they can see this is what you could do in a bigger open space. Get involved. I have a community interest company as well as my business, and I get children out to farms to just get on a farm, get the wellies on and get digging and see how soil turnaround works, etc., etc. Just so there's always a way. Being urban shouldn't be a barrier to it. It's more needed, so it should be more. You should take more. How can we do that instead of, well, we can't because it's too urban? The children need it more in an urban area. And I knew Lee would have answered it better, but
no, that's great. I will stick to some of your questions then, just while we hopefully get Lee back.
I'm trying to get him back.
That's okay. Thanks, Gail. Can you provide us some examples of specific foods or nutrients, that are particularly crucial for promoting healthy brain development in young children?
Yeah, I mean, brain development is probably it's all obviously in my Building a Brain course, and there's lots of little animations to share with children on Dr. Bertha Carrot, who's a character from my book, showing the nutrients that do different things in the brain. But the biggest thing, whole and natural, the ultra processed food landscape is actually damaging children's brain connections. There is no getting away from that. It's not just in the here and now. It's not just a piece of cake or a burger, or it is damaging their brain connections. I can't go into now. I don't have time. But it's too complicated. But ultra processed foods are going to be opposite of what you need. So to answer the foods that you do need, the key thing for brain development is essential fatty acids, or EFAs, to sort of abbreviate them. There's 4 essential fats which are crucial for building the brain. And considering the brain is 40% fat, those fats are really key to build that brain. So the obvious things are things like salmon, which for early years is a bit of, I'm doing a lot of work, and it's part of in this free course on salmon's being removed from menus because it's too expensive, and it's not being replaced with an equivalent essential fatty acid. So while salmon was brilliant for brain development, if you change that to cod or haddock, it's not the same. It's not got the same. It's fish, yes, but it's not got the same essential fatty acids for brain development. So the essential fatty acids are key for brain development. There are little vitamins and minerals, and again in my books there's a whole chapter called Building a Brain, and it explains the micronutrients, which are just as important as the macronutrients, so protein, fats, carbs. Micronutrients just as important, because things like an iodine or a zinc deficiency would cause slow cognitive development. So there's many aspects to it, but the key thing, avoid ultra processed, particularly in the 0 to 7 window. That is really, really important, as much as you can, or at least understand the impact of them in that 0 to 7 window. Beyond 7, their palate's developed enough for them to make more decisions themselves and not get as the food is in control of them as prior to that age. So sorry, a long answer.
That's good. Some people have just asked questions about what you just said. We've had a question from Abby asking, would you suggest frozen prepared vegetables would be a cost-effective option for families struggling to buy fresh?
Yeah, again, this is in my course. So the free course looks at how to make just everyday swaps. So tinned veg and frozen veg are just as nutritious, if not more nutritious, than fresh, because if you consider when both of them are picked, they're packed immediately. So when we buy it fresh, if we go to buy a fresh, say something fresh in the fridge from fruit and vegetables, it's travelled, it's sat in the shop, we buy it, it then sits in our fridge, we then might cook it and eat it. The fresh or frozen, the tinned or frozen option has been packaged, kept until you are ready to eat it. There's no deterioration in the nutrient quality. So yes, they are definitely a better option economically and no different, if not slightly better nutritionally.
That's interesting, because I remember when I was at school, we say, oh, you lose some of the nutrients when you cook it. So that's quite interesting.
You can lose nutrients when you cook it, but in terms of the packing and getting to that point, you haven't lost the nutrients in transportation and shelf life and sitting in your fridge, etc. It hasn't deteriorated. But still, with some foods, enhance nutritional quality with cooking, like tomatoes. So there's no catch-all for everything.
Brilliant, thank you. Goodness me, we've got a few more. Let me look to see. We've got a question from Melinda. Sorry if the pronunciation isn't good. How do you get the staff involved, excited with the gardening process and the benefits that comes from out of that? Maybe Lee, you want to answer this one. Welcome back.
I don't know. I honestly don't know what happened. My computer just turned itself off. So can you ask the question again? Sorry, I missed that.
That's okay. How do you get staff involved or excited with the gardening process and the benefits that comes out of that?
Right, that's a good question. Firstly, is giving clear direction and a bit like what we do with School Garden Success, have that actual plan for them to follow is super important. There's nothing worse than saying, right, we're going to start an allotment or start growing our own and not have a clue where we're going to go with that journey. So that is probably the biggest thing, is having that direction of where they're actually going with that experience. And to answer your question earlier on, which I disappeared from, is growing in raised beds as well. So starting in a really small raised bed, very easy. We send one out as a meter by meter big, and that can grow so much. You'd be surprised how much you can grow in such a small amount. And also, because it's not so large, it means you're more likely to get success from it, which is again what children want to see. There's nothing wrong with failing. I think that's a great lesson for children to learn. If something dies because we don't care for it, there's a good lesson there, right? But yeah, we can start in raised beds, or even, like I mentioned earlier on, that free lesson I've got on School Garden Success, we're just growing in a washing up bowl. So anyone can do it, whatever space you've got, just a washing up bowl, holes in the bottom, you can grow some plants from it. So yeah, so I hope there's an answer there somewhere.
Oh, that's great, thank you. I've got a couple more questions, and then I'm going to pass you over to Gail, because I'm sure she's got many questions as well. So Lee, for you, how would you say, or could you share with us some real world experience examples of how outdoor play can positively impact the holistic development of young children?
I think the biggest thing that you get from that is that I think it comes down to that memory side again of you'll be so amazing seeing how children can remember something they've done at such a small age because they're outside and learning with adults and just being outside. You talked a little bit about technology earlier, and I personally think technology is an important part of a child's life as they grow. I think we have that responsibility as adults to keep that balance there. And that's what we're doing. When we're outside, we're away from technology. We're keeping that balance within children's minds. And so they're experiencing something that they're actually going to come back to and remember in the future. So that's why it's so important.
Yeah, about technology, I mean, we've always had a rule in our house, no devices at the dinner table. And even if we go to restaurants, it's funny, my son, who's now 17, he will say, Mum, look at that family, none of them are talking to each other, they're all sitting on their phones, and it's amazing that it's like you say, it's just that taught behavior, and as hopefully he will instill that in his own family one day, but it is important just to make sure that we realize, I suppose, more important than anything is the impact we have on these young people's lives. Hopefully we haven't lost Lee again. I know, Lee, you've waited there. I tell you what, I have a confession. Earlier it did look like you had fallen asleep, and Louise pointed that out as well. But so that's good, because you literally froze.
I wasn't frozen, I actually did fall asleep.
Oh, bless you. I'm sure that's not the case. Yeah, I'll pass over to you, lovely, that you can ask a few questions.
Thanks, Adele. I'm going to go through some of the comments and questions in the chat because there's some really, really interesting and engaging comments here. B. Ashley D said that this was following your presentation, your chat, Lee, that children also learn new language, new conversation skills. They learn how to take turns, what plants need to grow. They learn about decomposition, plant life cycle, gross and fine motor skills. And that's just, that list is incredible, isn't it? And a lot of parents don't expose children to dirt and messy play. I know when we were all kids, we used to probably mud, I don't know, but I'm sure we did. You know, doing this exposes them to everything, the messy play, the soil and all of those. So thank you. That was just a comment, really. So have you got anything to add to that?
I think that's why it's so important we're all here and talking about this, because we have such a responsibility. There is a big amount of, or a big generation of parents that do not get out there and garden with their kids or just be outside. And so if we're the ones like leading that, then that's so important, because they can then take that home, and hopefully the families can take a lot from that. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it's very, very important. So that's great why we're all here.
Thank you. And actually, just following on from that, we talk about us educating our children, but actually, if the parents aren't particularly engaged, then for the children to get excited and take that home, so then parents can get more involved with that, and that, weirdly enough, could be educating the parents in a way that we never thought possible, and it's a great way to interact. So that's from Sharon Stevenson. Thank you, Sharon. And B. Ashley D also said, as children get more into online games, it might be good creating games that can transfer to the practical. So I don't know how you feel about creating a gardening game, Lee, when your spare time.
To be honest with you, I just think we need to keep that balance between it. I think, yeah, I hear that, and there is a lot of apps now where you can go outside and take photos of stuff, but then does that take away from just sitting around a book and talking and conversation? If we're just taking a photo, instant answer, is that taken away from that experience? So I hear it. And yeah, cool, like Skinny Jean Gardener game coming out 2024. But
watch this space.
Yeah, watch this space. Yeah, sure. But I just think, are we taking away from experiences by doing that?
Thank you. Mylinda, nice to see you, Mylinda. At Hillside, we started with yellow cherry tomatoes and then normal tomatoes, and the whole experience was lovely. She just wanted to say children then obviously pick and eat the produce, which is happy days. That's fantastic outcome. Elias, this is interesting. When can I start? I think they mean growing food. Do I need to wait until spring? And I've got another question about that. Actually, is you said about the seasons changing, which we've all experienced recently. Are there any top tips for things to plant either as seeds or as seedlings all year round? In fact, or or is there stuff that we can do now as winter approaches?
Yeah, there are loads. I tell you what, there's loads of different salads, come again, salads, carrots, all them sort of things. I personally always, because I'm looking for that success, especially with children, I personally grow with kids in them peak times, because I want them to get that success. And you'll see a lot of, through social media or just in general, especially around February time, people getting very nervous, and then March time, we missed out the point of sowing our seeds. You can sow seeds still in May time to get success later on in September. There's not a pressure for that, but I would say start thinking about start of the new year, start talking about it, start thinking about it. That's where the journey begins. One of the things that I do with children is that if they're going to grow tomatoes, for instance, let's sit down, let's make some plant labels, let's talk about that plant, and really start that process from that point before you even start sowing seeds or anything.
Thank you. And just last one for you here, Lee, on the chat as well. Is there, I imagine on your website as well, but are there any guides available for each type of veg and when these should be planted? I imagine there's resources out there as well.
Yeah, to be honest with you, the best place for that sort of thing, if you've got time to sort of search for it, is the RHS website. There's a lot on there, a lot of information. I'd say head over there, you'll get some good information from there. if you're looking for specific plants that you want to grow.
Thank you, Lee. Louise, this is following on from something you said as well, that, and it probably mirrors what most people think, and it's just a comment from the Abbey. Sorry, no, it's from Mary Keegan. She says it's a shame that we teach them at such a young age about healthy eating. We do all this hard work, and then when they move to secondary schools, it's kind of forgotten about. But you know, we know that, don't we, from what you've said, that it's really important to kind of really embed that as early as possible. She was just commenting really how disappointing it is that they do get distracted.
I'm not sure it's always forgotten. Sorry, Lee. I just think if we kind of, it depends on how established those early behaviours were. So I know there is a growing movement within sort of a generation of teens to take ownership of their own health. There'll always be peer pressure, and there will always be falling into the sort of the norm of junk food, etc., etc. But there is a whole campaign, a whole youth movement. It's called Bite Back 2030, and they are actually youth activists on the food campaign. So they were at the Labour Party conference. I connect with them, support them when I can. But they are all basically just saying, we don't want this rubbish. We deserve better. Our bodies deserve better. So it's not automatic that a teen will grow out of it, not at all. It depends how habitual their relationship with food is. If they do slip, but they're not letting the food take control of them, that's absolutely fine. But their palate is likely to not like the food as much or not get addicted to it as much if they've not been exposed to it too much through the early years. But yeah, secondary schools are getting better. The whole food landscape is getting slightly better, could be a lot better, but it's obviously postcode lottery as to how good it is. So that's sad because that exacerbates the health and wealth divide.
Brilliant, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm just conscious of the time, and I know there's a lot of the educators has joined us today. There's a time limit, and people are trying to get back to running their busy settings. Just quickly, a couple of things. Please join us next month for the webinar, which is going to be on the 14th of November, which is all about the financial solutions that's already available for the early years sector, as well as what Parent is doing to try and support this really struggling sector with finance. So thanks again, everybody, so much for joining us today. It's been fantastic. We have loved hearing from Louise and from Lee, and the quirkiness of some of the comments, all done tongue in cheek, but it's been really great, and to hear people and settings experiences as well, what they're doing within the setting to try and support the early years children within our care. Thanks everybody, and hopefully we'll see you next month at our webinar. Thanks for joining. See you all later. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks so much.